Chapter 8. Nancy. After Monk saw her shadow on the wall, Nancy disappeared down the stairs and ran all the way back to the tavern. She was very excited, but she tried not to show it. When she got home, she was so pale and her eyes were so bright that Bill Sykes asked her if she had a fever. She had to stay with him, but she planned to go speak to Rose Maylie. She had heard Fagin and Monks mention Rose's name. She had to tell Rose what Fagin and Monks had said about Oliver. Nancy wanted to help Oliver very much, but she did not wish to have Fagin or Bill Sykes arrested. She did not want to betray them, even if they were mean and cruel, because they were the only friends she had ever known. On the following night, Nancy gave Bill Sykes a hot drink. She put something in it to make him feel tired, when at last he fell asleep. She started on her way to see Rose Maylie. Nancy had overheard Monks tell Fagin the name of the hotel where the family was staying. She rushed there, knocking into people on her way and darting in between the heads of horses in the streets. She seemed to have no concern for her own safety. The people who passed by her thought she must be mad. Rose was very surprised when Nancy was shown into her room, but she was even more surprised by what Nancy had to tell her. Nancy spoke quickly. She told Rose that Monks offered Fagin money if Oliver were recovered. Monks offered even more money if Fagin could make a thief out of Oliver. Nancy also told Rose that she heard the men speaking for a second time. Just the night before, Monks said all traces of Oliver's identity had been eliminated. He also said that the Maylies would be interested to know Oliver's true identity. Nancy had to hurry back to the tavern before she was missed. If Fagin or Bill Sykes knew where she had been, they would surely make her suffer for it. "But why do you wish to return to such people?" Rose cried. "We will help you to a place of safety far away from them, if you will only let us." "Dear lady," cried Nancy, "if I had only heard such words when I was a girl, I might have been saved from this kind of life. Now it is too late." "But where can I speak to you again?" asked Rose. "There must be a place where we can meet. Every Sunday night, between 11 and midnight, I will walk on London Bridge, if I am alive," said Nancy, then rushing out of the room. Mrs. Maylie and Oliver had walked to a park. Rose decided to sit down and write to Mr. Losberne for advice, although she wanted very much to discover the truth about Oliver's parents and learn of the fortune that Monks had spoken of. She did not want anything to do with that would place Nancy in danger. As she was writing, Oliver entered the room and called to her in such an excited, breathless way that she became alarmed. "What is the matter?" she cried anxiously. "I saw Mr. Brownlow in the park, and ran up to speak to him." "He is here now," Oliver answered. Rose hurried into the parlor to meet the kind old gentleman. Oliver was impatient to see Mrs. Bedwin again, so Mr. Brownlow offered to take them over to his new lodgings. While Oliver visited with the housekeeper, Rose told Mr. Brownlow all that she had heard from Nancy. "We must be very cautious," Mr. Brownlow said. "We will never get to the bottom of this mystery unless we can learn more about this man, Monks. On Sunday night, we will ask Nancy to point out Monks to us. If she cannot do so, we will ask her to describe what he looks like, and name a place where he can be found." It was decided that no one, besides Mrs. Maylie and Dr. Losberne, should know of the matter. Not even Oliver would learn of it, unless they were able to discover the truth about his past. By this time, there was now someone new in Fagin's game. It was Noah Claypole, the boy who had worked with Oliver in Mr. Sowerberry's shop, and had tried to make him cry on the night before he ran away. Noah had stolen all the money in the coffin maker's shop before going to London. He was very glad to work for Fagin, and he hoped to make his fortune as a thief. This was fortunate for Fagin. The artful dodger had been arrested not long before. The young thief was sentenced to life in jail. Noah filled his empty spot perfectly. On Sunday night, Fagin arrived at the tavern to speak to Bill Sykes. While they sat whispering at the table, the clock struck the hour, 11 o'clock. Nancy got up nervously and put on her bonnet. "Why, where do you think you're going at this time of night?" demanded Sykes. "I'm not well," said Nancy. "I want a breath of fresh air." "Open the window, then," growled Sykes. "I must go into the street," said Nancy. I won't be gone long." Sykes rose from the table and stomped across the room. He locked the door and took away the key. Then he pulled the bonnet from Nancy's head and threw it on the floor. "You'll stay here," he shouted. "What do you mean by this, Bill?" Nancy cried. "You must let me go." Sykes seized her roughly by the arm and forced her to sit in a chair. She struggled with him until the clock struck 12. Then she knew that she could no longer meet Rose on London Bridge. Rose and Mr. Brownlow waited for Nancy until it was very late. They were very worried about her when she did not come. Fagin eyed Nancy strangely as he prepared to leave that night. He thought that she must have been planning to meet someone. Why else would she have struggled so violently against Bill Sykes? The next morning, he met secretly with Noah Claypole and told him that he had a very special job for him to do. He wanted Noah to follow Nancy and spy on her. "Tell me where she goes, who she sees, and what she says," Fagin said. A week later, on Sunday night, Sykes was down at the tavern with Nancy. Fagin had sent him on a robbery so that he could not prevent Nancy from keeping her appointment. After 11, Noah followed her to the bridge. It was a dark, foggy night. He hid in the shadows. Nancy did not notice him. Nancy met Rose and Mr. Brownlow and led them down some stone steps at the end of the bridge, where she thought that they could not be seen. "I couldn't come last Saturday night. I was kept at the tavern by force," she said. Rose told Nancy how very worried they had been about her. Then Mr. Brownlow asked if she could point monks out to them. Nancy said she could not do that, but she could describe what he looked like. When she finished, Mr. Brownlow declared that he had thought he knew the man, but by a different name. Rose and Mr. Brownlow begged to be allowed to help Nancy in some way, but she told them there was nothing that could be done for her. Then she hurried away into the darkness. After they had parted company, Noah Claypole ran back to Fagin as fast as his legs would carry him. He told the old man all that he had heard. While Noah slept, Fagin waited for Bill Sykes to come in. At last, he muttered when he heard Sykes' footsteps on the stairs. Sykes threw a bundle on the table in front of Fagin. The old man grabbed it and locked it in a cupboard. Then he poured the robber a drink. "Why are you looking at me so strangely?" growled Sykes. "What have you got in your mind?" Fagin raised his hand and shook his trembling finger in the air, but he was so upset that he could not speak. He stared at Sykes with wide eyes. Bill Sykes grabbed him by the collar and shook him roughly. "Speak," he shouted, "speak. Tell me what is it you have to say." Fagin pointed to Noah Claypole in the bed and said, "What would you do, Bill, if that lad were to tell us on all of us? What if he described us to the right people and told where we could be found? What if he told them about a job that we had done?" Sykes shook his fist at the boy. "If he was still alive when I found him, I would crush his skull with the iron heel of my boot." "And what if someone else were to do such a thing?" asked Fagin eagerly. "I would do the same thing, no matter who it was," Bill Sykes shuddered. Fagin then got Noah out of bed and had him tell Sykes everything that he had seen Nancy do. When he had heard it all, Bill Sykes jumped up with a yell and flung on his coat. Fagin tried to say something to him, but he pushed the old man out of his way and darted wildly down the stairs. He did not pause once. Not until he had reached the room where Nancy lay asleep. She awoke with a start. "Get up," he growled fiercely. "You were watched tonight. Every word you said was overheard." Bill," cried Nancy. "I did nothing that could hurt you. Please hear me." Bill Sykes grabbed his club and came at Nancy with all his force. She tried to defend himself, but soon stumbled to the ground. She stared at him with wild eyes and put her hand on him. Then she fell over. Of all the bad deeds that had been committed in London that dark night, Nancy's death was the worst. It was the most cruel. Bill Sykes was filled with terror by what he had done. He kept imagining Nancy's eyes following him around the room. He kept seeing her face before him the way it had been just before she staggered and fell. Finally, he ran from the room. He walked out of the city and into the country. He rambled through fields and meadows and lay down to rest under her hedges. His shaggy, dirty white dog followed at his heels. He wandered over miles and miles of ground before deciding to return to London and hide at Fagin's house. He overheard in a village tavern that the police were looking for a strong man with a shaggy white dog. In order that he would not be recognized, he decided to drown the dog. He wrapped a heavy stone in a handkerchief and walked to the edge of a nearby pond. He wanted to tie the stone to the dog and throw him in the water. He called to the animal. The dog looked up in his face and, as if it knew what he was planning to do, turned and bounded away across the field. "Come here," cried Sykes angrily, but the dog did not return.